Becky Couchesne from Frog Hollow Farm. Welcome to my kitchen. I'm going to show you how to roll out and make an apple pie today. Okay. Before I roll out the pie dough, first thing I'm going to do is get the apples cut, and I use the pie tin to measure it, so I'm not using any measuring cups or anything like that. Pie, I'm going to use about 8 to 10 apples depending on the size, and I like to use a mixture of different apples. Mostly I'm going to be using Pink Lady today because that's what we have on the farm. That's what we're harvesting or harvested. And I have a little bit of Spitzenbergs and a little bit of Ashmead kernel. So I highly recommend you mixing apples. There's a lot of really wonderful apples in the farmer's market now, and the Pink Ladies are wonderful pie apple. It's nice to get a different variety, get some different flavors. The Ashmead kernel is a small, kind of dry apple, at least they are here, but they have really intense, amazing apple flavors. So I'm peeling the apples into a bowl because I'm going to be composting everything, the peel, the cores, everything. We compost everything here on the farm. We make probably 20 tons of compost from all the kitchen scraps and my own home kitchen scraps. So we use every little piece of the apple for sure, in one way or the other. Talk about peeling a little bit. You don't have to peel your apples. It depends on the variety of apples. Some apple skins, the Pink Ladies actually have a fairly thin skin. Some, like the Ashmead kernel or the Spitzenberg, have a thicker skin, and if you don't peel them, it might be a little bit leathery, that piece. It depends, it's totally up to you. I've gotten into the habit of peeling apples because my children complained when I didn't peel the apples one time, so they like to not have any skin. But actually, if you don't peel them and you leave a little bit of skin on there, or you could use the skin on some of them and peel the rest of them, it adds a little more pectin, a little bit thicker to the fillings. Apple pie is my absolute favorite pie. It is traditional in my family. My mother used to make and still makes really wonderful apple pies. And when Gravenstein time would roll around, my aunt and my mother, who were both really wonderful bakers, would always make Gravenstein apple pie, which was, to me, the best. I still think that Gravensteins make some of the best pies. But to me, it's just, apple pie just represents fall, and I love it that you can kind of have it with savory, like with cheese. You can have it with whipped cream or ice cream, but I make a pie and my family goes through it in about 2 days. There's 4 of us, and in 2 days it's gone. So it's a strong tradition. It's probably my family's absolute favorite pie. Apples for the pie, and instead of measuring them into a measuring cup, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them into my pie pan. And it's always faster to do like motions all at once. So you want to peel them all at once, cut them and core them all at once, and then slice them into the pan all at once. So I'm going to cut these quarters. I like to use a good paring knife, nice sharp paring knife for this. So I'm going to core these. I've got them all peeled and quartered. I'm going to core them, and I'm going to cut them directly into the pie pan. And you can do this on a cutting board if you want. I just like to do it in my hand. I'm used to doing it this way. They don't have to be uniform sizes. Some are a little thicker, some are a little thinner, but about like that. And I'm going to do a few more. And like I said, the apples that are firmer in texture, or drier in texture, I should say, you might want to cut those a little thinner. Fuji's can also be used in pie. I wouldn't use all Fuji's because they're sort of very sweet. They're really an eating apple, and as they bake, they don't soften and sort of melt out like other apples do. So put some in, but I wouldn't put all Fuji's by any means. Okay, so I've got my apples peeled and cored and sliced, and this is about how high you'd like it to be. You don't want to have it too much. Too many apples and they won't cook, and then you'll have a bunch of undercooked apples. So I don't know, I would say maybe about a 2.5-2-inch dome from the very top, from the rim. That's how I like to eyeball it instead of measuring it. So, and I'm gonna put this aside because we're gonna roll the dough out. And I'm gonna add about a scant half cup of sugar, and that will change depending on what kind of apples we have. I'm gonna add about a quarter cup, about half the amount of flour as I do sugar. I'm gonna add cinnamon. I'm gonna grate, I have in here a little bit of whole allspice that I've put in the mortar and pestle, and I'm just gonna use a pinch of that. And then I'm gonna use my microplane, and I'm gonna just grate just a few little gratings of nutmeg, not too much. Here we go. Set that aside. And I'm just gonna stir these up. Because I wanted you to see how much flour and sugar and spices I used, I separated them. But normally what I do is put all the spices, flour and the sugar together in one bowl, whisk it together, and then put it over the apples. That way everything's more evenly distributed. And I always add the vinegar last. So I'm gonna get this stirred up there. You can see the apples are coated in the sugar and the cinnamon. And then I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. The cider vinegar adds the acidity, and it adds back in that apple flavor. So instead of using lemon juice or another kind of vinegar, use apple cider vinegar because you just get that really intense apple flavor from it. So I'm gonna put that in last after everything else is mixed in, because if you add it too early, then it kind of clumps up in the flour. So there we go. This is all ready. I'm just gonna let this sit, and you'll see that it's gonna get juicier as the sugar sort of scratches the surface of the apples and starts to exude the juice. So I'm gonna set these aside while we roll out the dough. Okay, so I'm ready to roll my pie dough out now. This dough has been resting in the refrigerator for about 2 hours. I would say 2 hours minimum. It's probably better to make it the night before, leave it in the refrigerator, and use it the next day. But it really needs a good 2 hours to really absorb all the moisture in for the flour to absorb the moisture, the water that you're adding in there. So I'm gonna just put this on. I have a nice granite countertop, which is really great, but you can use a big cutting board or like a big piece of marble. If that's what you have, no problem there. Just make sure that it's big enough, that whatever cutting board or marble you're using is big enough so that the dough isn't hanging off the edge. So I'm gonna start rolling this out, and I'm gonna as you can see, this is not like a flat disc, so I'm just gonna pound it a little bit to flatten it out a little bit. Not too much. Turn it and pound it the other way, just to kind of give me a head start. Now you wanna work quickly when you're rolling out pie dough because you don't want it to stick. And start from the center and go out, and we're gonna be rotating the dough around. So I'm just gonna go like this. Flour in there. And this is the thing I love about this dough is that it doesn't, as you can see, it's rolling out, it's not shrinking back, because when it shrinks back a lot, that means that the dough is likely to be kind of tough, like maybe it has too much water in it. And make sure you have flour close by. You don't want to put too much, and we'll wipe it off before we put it in the pie pan, but you also don't want it to be sticking. If you are going to use a marble or a different kind of surface, you might want to like put some ice packs on the marble or even the cutting board, and to cool it down, so if it feels hot, that way the dough won't melt so much. So see, this is like the thing I love about this dough. I think one of the main things that people have trouble with when they're making pie dough is it cracks, and then you're patching it, and then it takes more time, and then the dough gets more cracked and it falls apart. And so I think it's really, this dough won't crack on you. Also, so I was going in from the center out and then rotating, because no matter what you do, I'm right-handed. I know that I'm going to be heavier rolling on the right side. So this helps even it out a little bit. And I think this is about the thickness that we want. So I'm just going to do a little bit more. There we go. Now I'm going to take a dish towel, or if you have a pastry brush, just to wipe off some of the flour, and then I'm going to fold it over, wipe off some excess flour. If you have too much flour, it can be a little tough. So do that. And then I'm going to roll it over my pie pan. There's two ways you can get the pie off the counter. You can fold it in quarters, set it in the middle, or you can roll it over your pie tin. But I think or your rolling pin, I'm going to do this. This works a little bit better for me, and no one's going to see the crease because it's going to be in the bottom. And then there you are. Oops. I'm just going to scooch that out so that it's pretty even. And I want to just kind of push the dough, or the pie dough, into the corners of the pie pan, so I don't have any gaps between the pie pan and the dough. Just kind of scooch that down in there. And this is plenty of dough for this pie tin. Now I'm just going to trim this excess dough a little bit beyond the rim, the outside rim of the pie pan. And you know, I like to use this aluminum pie pan, but I know people will say, oh, don't use aluminum and you should only use ceramic or just use Pyrex. Those will all work. Actually, at the farm, when you buy a pie from us, they are in aluminum foil pans, which are, you know, the foil pans that you would buy in the grocery store, and they work just fine too. You don't have to really agonize too much over what to bake it in. If you are going to use an aluminum foil pan, you want to make sure to bake it on a baking sheet, because first of all, it'll be kind of fairly flimsy when you take it out of the oven, and also that heat, that layer of heat from the metal of the sheet pan, will help cook the bottom of the pie pan. So here it is, it's ready to go. I'm gonna set this in the freezer for just a second. So I'm gonna set this in the freezer for just a minute because it's a little soft, and I wanna make sure when I put the apples in there that the apple corners or edges don't puncture the bottom of the pie tin. So I'm gonna put this in the freezer just while I get organized and cleaned up to do the top dough. Okay, so I'm ready to fill the pie now. This has gotten nice and hard, so it's not just a few seconds or a few minutes in the freezer, and it's fine. As you can see, the juice has come out of the apples just like I said it would. And here I'm going to put this in the pie pan. Scrape all that juice out. I'm just going to pat this down a little bit so there aren't any little corners sticking out that would puncture the pie crust. And then I'm just going to put like little pats of butter on here. It's probably maybe a tablespoon of butter. And then I'm going to roll out top crust. So I'm ready to roll out the top crust. So I've got my area all cleaned off with my bench knife, and I'm going to flour it pretty liberally. And I'm going to flour the top. And again, we're going to pound this a little bit. Okay, great. So I'm going to start rolling this out just like before, from the center outward. It's a good idea to flour your rolling pin too. So I'm going to start here. And again, you want to work quickly and rotate. Don't worry if the edges look a little like they're coming apart. Remember, you can always stoosh them back together. And you're going to be cutting some of that off anyway. It's good if the top crust, when you're making your dough, make your top crust a little bit bigger so that you have more dough overhanging. Because I'll show you when we make the pie, you're going to kind of fold the top crust underneath the bottom crust on the rim. So you want it to be a little bit bigger. So you have a nice, good sized crust. This still feels nice and cold. So as you can see, the dough's not shrinking back, not cracking. I'm ready to put the top crust on the pie. And again, we're just gonna wipe off some of the excess flour, not too much, so that's good. But again, I'm gonna do it about an inch off the rim. And I'm always put pies on a sheet pan, never directly in the oven, for two reasons. As I explained with the foil pan, it's nice to have that heat that the metal sheet pan gives the bottom of the pie crust. But also, if you have all these juice, if the pie is really juicy, and all these juices are exuded from come out of the pie, then it'll be all over the bottom of your oven, and it'll smoke, and it's, can you see that? Okay, so see, I'm folding the top crust over the bottom crust, and this is going to be a very thick edge, which is great. Some people like to just have the crust edge here, so this is going to be a nice thick one, and I'm going to fold it under. Now, it also prevents leakage too. And then after I get it all the way around, then my right thumb, and I'm just going to gently push in. You can also use the tines of a fork. Okay, so if after you cover the pie and put the edges in, if it's still, the dough feels a little soft, you can put it in the freezer and let it firm up a little bit and then do the edges, if you want to. But there we go. So I kind of stick in the edges that might be sticking out and might burn. And there we go, got a nice thick crust. This is all done. I'm gonna score the pie, and I just make a couple of slits, like try to find center and just make little cuts. But you can do like wavy lines like this if you want to. You can do all. Okay, so this is all ready to go. Before I put it in the oven, I'm gonna stick it in the freezer for about 15 minutes, just to let the crust harden up. This will make the edges a little stay intact and hold their shape when they're in the oven first. So about 15 minutes in the freezer, and then I'm going to put them in a 425 degree oven. Do not use convection, do not use a fan. I'm going to put it in the bottom of my oven, and I'm going to cook it at 425 for about 15 minutes. Then I'm going to turn it down, and I'm going to bake it at 375, 350, 375, depending on your oven, for probably another 45 minutes.